Welcome, the anointed ones. The truth isn't hidden, it's just buried beneath layers of lies no one dares to dig through. When the private investigator was hired to uncover the real you, they thought it would be another routine case, sift through a bit of dirt, find a few skeletons and close the file. But what they unearthed wasn't just surprising, it was mind-bending. Fact: studies show that 80% of private investigations end with mundane conclusions. But in your case, the investigators stumbled into a rabbit hole so deep, they probably wish they'd brought a flashlight and a therapist. And here's the kicker: you didn't even try to hide anything. The truth about you was sitting in plain sight, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to confront it. What they found wasn't just shocking, it was the stuff of legends, mysteries, and, wait, did that really happen? Moments. Strap in, because this is not your typical dirty laundry story. This is the tale of a chosen one who lives life so beyond the ordinary, even the investigator couldn't keep their jaw off the floor. Number 1. The Untraceable Past. The investigator thought they were dealing with another straightforward case, a simple dive into someone's past to uncover the usual secrets. Old flames, financial mishaps, maybe a run-in with the law. Instead, they found something they couldn't explain. Your history didn't just raise questions, it rewrote them. Records they expected to access easily, school transcripts, job histories, even basic medical files, either didn't exist or contradicted themselves. One database might list you as having lived in a small town for years, while another shows no trace of your presence there. Friends and acquaintances were no help either. Some remembered you vividly, recounting shared experiences with a level of detail that couldn't be fabricated. But others, people who should have known you just as well, swore they'd never even heard your name. Then came the events that defied logic. Moments in your life where something should have gone horribly wrong, a near-death experience, an impossible decision, a disastrous situation, but didn't. Instead, everything seemed to resolve itself in a way no one could rationalize. These weren't just lucky breaks. They felt more like interventions from something bigger, something outside the investigator's understanding. The deeper they dug, the stranger it got. Patterns began to emerge. Dates, locations, and circumstances that lined up with events far beyond your life. It was as if you were somehow connected to things happening on a much larger scale, threads tied to the fabric of history itself. What made it all even more unsettling was the lack of intent. You weren't covering your tracks or hiding anything. This wasn't the work of someone trying to protect a secret. It was the life of someone who simply wasn't supposed to be understood. By the end, the investigator wasn't just confused. They were unnerved, questioning if they'd uncovered a person or a phenomenon. Number 2. Encoded destiny. The investigator wasn't looking for patterns. They were looking for facts. But as they sifted through your life, something started to stand out. Connections so precise and strange that they couldn't be ignored. It began with little things, like the dates of major milestones in your life coinciding with significant world events. Not the kind of stuff you could plan, but eerie overlaps that made them wonder if there was a deeper design at work. Then came the numbers. Bank account IDs, phone numbers, even seemingly random addresses, all carrying sequences that showed up in places they shouldn't. The investigator started cross-referencing, out of curiosity more than anything. And what they found was unsettling. These numbers matched coordinates for historic events, astronomical phenomena, even ancient texts. It wasn't just coincidence. It was as if your entire existence was coded, written into the universe like some hidden script. The investigator's curiosity turned into obsession. They scoured your social media posts, emails, and casual conversations, trying to figure out if you were doing this intentionally. But no. There was nothing deliberate about it. You weren't aware of these patterns, yet they surrounded you, almost as if your life operated on its own secret algorithm. Even more bizarre were the moments where your choices, small everyday decisions, seemed to ripple outward, influencing events far beyond your reach. A casual encounter led to a major breakthrough for someone else. A chance meeting connected two strangers who changed each other's lives. It was as if you were a living domino, tipping over pieces in ways no one could predict. By the end, the investigator wasn't sure if you were a person or a puzzle, but one thing was clear: your life wasn't random. It was encoded, intricately woven into something far bigger than anyone could understand. Number 3. Phantom connections. The investigator expected to find a predictable trail: friends, colleagues, family members, the usual web of connections that defines a person's life. Instead, they stumbled into a maze of names, places, and organizations tied to you in ways that didn't make sense. Your name appeared on lists where it shouldn't have been, linked to people you had no reason to know, and projects far beyond the scope of any ordinary life. There were whispers of your involvement in groups that operate in the shadows, organizations whose very existence is denied by those in power. But when they dug deeper, no one would confirm anything. Emails were sent, calls were made, yet everyone on the other end either denied knowing you or spoke in cryptic half-truths like they were afraid to say too much. Then came the classified files. Through a contact, or maybe sheer luck, they managed to pull restricted documents, and there you were again. Not as a key player, but always somewhere in the background. Your name, a note, a reference to something you'd said or done, even though there was no clear explanation for how you'd be involved. It was as if your influence was woven into events without your direct participation, like a silent force shaping outcomes. The real shock came when they traced these connections further. People who've risen to unimaginable power, breakthroughs in fields ranging from technology to art, decisions that shifted entire industries, all seem to link back to you in some inexplicable way. Not because you were pulling strings, but because your existence itself seemed to pull people together, like gravity. By the end, the investigator wasn't just confused, they were unsettled. Your life didn't just touch others, it left fingerprints on the hidden workings of the world itself. Number 4. Unnatural resilience. The investigator expected to find cracks, moments where life's inevitable hardships had left you broken or struggling to get back on your feet. Instead, they uncovered something that felt almost unnatural. Time and again, in situations where most people would have fallen apart, you had not only survived, but emerged stronger, as though some unseen force was steering you away from disaster. There were financial setbacks that should have wiped you out, unexpected losses, bad investments, or opportunities that never materialized. Yet, somehow, you always rebounded, often landing in a better position than before. The investigator tracked down records of layoffs, economic downturns, even debt that would have buried most people, but for you, it was almost as if the universe intervened. Doors closed, yes, but others opened in ways that defied logic. Physically, the story was no less baffling. There were accidents that should have left permanent scars, illnesses that should have set you back for years. Medical records hinted at recoveries that were faster than they should have been, even bordering on miraculous. Doctors' notes included phrases like unexpected improvement or unexplainable outcome. It wasn't luck, it was something more deliberate, as though your body refused to yield to the usual rules of nature. Emotionally, the pattern continued. Losses, betrayals, and heartbreaks that would have destroyed most people seemed to galvanize you. It wasn't that you didn't feel pain. The investigator found traces of it in letters, messages, and photos. But where others might spiral, you turned adversity into momentum. It was as if every setback only sharpened your edge. By the time they pieced it together, the investigator wasn't sure whether to be inspired or unnerved. It wasn't just resilience. It was as though the universe itself had decided you were too important to fail. Number 5. Silent followers. The investigators started noticing an odd pattern. People, some influential, others almost invisible, seemed to gravitate around you in ways that were difficult to explain. They weren't close friends or family. In fact, many of them you'd never even met. But their actions, their decisions, and their attention were undeniably tied to you. There were business executives who quietly tracked your career, citing you in meetings or borrowing ideas they had no way of knowing you'd even considered. Artists and writers hinted at being inspired by someone like you, though they'd never directly admit it. Social media accounts followed your every move with a strange intensity, reposting your thoughts and reshaping your words into something almost prophetic. What struck the investigator most was the lack of malice in their behavior. These weren't stalkers or enemies waiting to pounce. They were admirers, acting out of something deeper: respect, awe, maybe even reverence. It was as if they saw in you something larger than life, something they couldn't fully articulate but were compelled to follow. Some of these followers were powerful: CEOs, politicians, and leaders whose decisions influence millions. Others were obscure figures working quietly in the shadows: researchers, hackers, or activists who seemed to be aligning their efforts with a path you unknowingly charted. The investigator dug deeper, hoping to understand why. What they found was even stranger. Whispers of your name in obscure forums, anonymous letters referencing you as if you were a symbol of something greater. None of these people were connected directly, yet they all seemed bound by an unspoken allegiance to you. By the end, the investigator was left with one undeniable truth: you weren't just living a life. You were leading a movement, one so subtle and profound that even you might not be fully aware of it. Number 6. Altered footprints. When the investigator turned to hard evidence, security footage, transaction logs, and eyewitness accounts, they expected clarity. Instead, they found a series of contradictions that made no sense. You were there, and yet you weren't. Surveillance cameras captured everyone in a room but you, even when eyewitnesses swore you were present. In some cases, the footage was inexplicably corrupted: static, blank screens, or distorted images at the precise moment you entered the frame. Security experts called it a technical glitch, but the investigator noticed it happened far too often, in places with no connection to each other. It wasn't just cameras. Digital records told the same strange story. GPS data from your phone placed you miles away from where people reported seeing you. Financial transactions showed you in one location, while eyewitnesses swore you were somewhere else entirely. Timestamps didn't align. Travel times were impossible. It was as if you existed in two places at once, or, more disturbingly, in neither. Eyewitnesses made it even stranger. Their accounts often clashed wildly, even when they'd been standing in the same room. Some said you were there, but couldn't describe what you were wearing or where you stood. Others claimed they felt your presence without ever actually seeing you. A few even hesitated to confirm you were real, as if you'd been a figment of their imagination. The investigator became obsessed with these inconsistencies. They pored over every detail, trying to find a logical explanation, but none emerged. Instead, they were left with one unsettling conclusion. Your existence seemed to bend the rules of reality itself. You didn't just slip through cracks. You created them, leaving footprints that vanished or rewrote themselves the moment someone tried to follow. Number 7. The energy signature. The investigator couldn't ignore the strange technical glitches that seemed to follow you like a shadow. It started with minor malfunctions: recorded calls cutting out whenever your name came up, emails vanishing from inboxes, and corrupted files tied to your information. At first, they chalked it up to coincidence or user error. But the pattern was too persistent, too specific. Wherever your name or presence was involved, technology seemed to rebel. Devices that should have been reliable behaved erratically. Lie detectors spiked unpredictably when questions about you were asked, even when the subject was telling the truth. GPS trackers scrambled their coordinates, placing you in impossible locations. Surveillance systems either went offline or produced distorted footage as though your presence interfered with their basic function. The investigator decided to test this phenomenon directly. They set up controlled experiments, calling someone to ask about you, attempting to track your location, even running basic facial recognition software. The results were baffling. The systems failed, froze, or returned nonsensical data every single time. Experts they consulted were left scratching their heads, offering explanations that felt more like guesses than answers. It wasn't just technology either. Signals, radio, Wi-Fi, even basic cell service seemed to weaken in your vicinity. People reported dropped calls, lagging internet connections, or devices that inexplicably powered off whenever you were nearby. It was as if your very presence emitted a field that disrupted anything electronic. By the end, the investigator couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't accidental. It wasn't sabotage or faulty hardware. It was you. Your existence seemed to resonate on a frequency that defied conventional understanding. An energy signature so unique it bent the rules of the modern world. And for the first time in their career, they realized no technology could measure or contain it. Number 8. Coded lineage. When the investigator dug into your family history, they expected to find the usual mix of ancestors, farmers, tradespeople, maybe a few notable figures here and there. What they uncovered instead felt like the unraveling of an ancient mystery. Your lineage wasn't just unique. It was nearly impossible to trace, as though parts of it had been deliberately erased or hidden. Official records often ended abruptly, with no explanation for gaps spanning decades or even centuries. When they attempted to fill these voids, they stumbled onto whispers of names and events that didn't belong in any conventional genealogy. Instead of finding concrete ties to historical figures, they found references to people who should have been legends, individuals who existed on the blurred line between reality and myth. One ancestor appeared to have ties to an ancient society that historians claim vanished without a trace. Another name surfaced in connection with a war that predates written records, their role described in old oral traditions but conspicuously absent from any formal documentation. Your bloodline seemed to intersect with stories of power and mystery, tales that were dismissed as folklore but carried unsettling consistencies across cultures and continents. The strangest part was how these discoveries didn't stay confined to dusty archives or forgotten libraries. Mythological references surfaced in modern contexts, cryptic mentions in obscure scientific papers, names echoing in hidden chapters of religious texts. It was as if your ancestry wove through time itself, appearing wherever humanity brushed against the extraordinary. By the end, the investigator wasn't sure what they had uncovered: a family tree, a coded prophecy, or the remains of a story too dangerous to be fully told. All they knew was that your lineage didn't belong in history books. It belonged in the spaces history couldn't explain. Number 9. Unpaid debts. As the investigator pored over your financial records, they expected to find the usual mix of assets and liabilities, loans and investments. What they didn't expect was a trail of debts. Debts that didn't belong to you but that others owed you in ways they couldn't fully comprehend. These weren't just monetary debts. They were more abstract, more unsettling. There were unpaid favors from powerful individuals, people who had been in your debt but had never acknowledged it. Contracts and agreements that never saw the light of day, yet you had somehow unknowingly influenced their outcomes. Money was owed to you, but not through any formal means. It was as if your very presence, your decisions, and your actions had shifted the balance of the world around you, placing others in a position where they could not move forward without eventually returning something to you. Social debts became even stranger. People who had wronged you in the past, people who owed apologies or reconciliations, were living with an unspoken obligation they couldn't escape. Some of them were long gone from your life, but still, the investigator found strange instances where they had made efforts, direct or indirect, to make things right, even if they didn't know why. They just felt compelled to balance the scales. Then there were the emotional debts, those unspoken, intangible exchanges. The way people you barely knew seemed to draw strength from you, leaving without ever truly giving anything back. In many cases, these individuals never even realized they had taken something from you, but the investigator found traces of it in the lives they led, the decisions they made, the way they carried on after meeting you. It was as if you didn't just interact with the world. You shifted it, creating an invisible debt that others couldn't avoid. By the time the investigator understood what was happening, they realized something much deeper was at play. You weren't just a person. You were a force of balance, and the world itself owed you in ways no one could measure. Number 10. Subconscious influencer. The investigator couldn't help but notice the strange pattern that seemed to follow you. It wasn't just your influence on the people close to you. It was a subtle, almost invisible ripple that spread through the lives of strangers. Trends in fashion, language, and even behavior began to emerge that traced directly back to you, but not in ways that could be linked to deliberate actions or obvious influence. It was as if your presence alone shaped the world around you, and people around you, or even people who'd never met you, found themselves aligning with your essence, almost without realizing it. It started with small things. A particular word or phrase you used in casual conversation suddenly showed up in the way people communicated, as if the idea had taken on a life of its own. Then came the style choices, clothing, hairstyles, accessories, that seemed to mirror your own unique look. What you wore today, someone else was wearing tomorrow, but it wasn't about copying you. It was about aligning with an energy that was somehow contagious. But it wasn't just fashion and language. Actions and attitudes began to follow. Individuals who'd never met you were acting in ways that reflected your values, adopting similar ideas or approaches to problems without ever being exposed to your thoughts directly. It was as if you were planting ideas into the collective subconscious, nudging people toward behaviors or philosophies that, at their core, mirrored yours. The investigator even noted moments where entire communities seemed to shift in small but noticeable ways, adjusting their priorities or embracing new ideologies that reflected your influence, even though you never intended to impose them. The real kicker? You weren't aware of it. There was no conscious effort on your part to create these ripples. It was as if the universe itself had decided that your presence had the power to shape the world, bending it in ways you couldn't see, but others were feeling. By the time the investigator realized what was happening, they could only conclude one thing. You weren't just part of the zeitgeist, you were the quiet hand that guided it without ever trying. Number 11, hidden warnings. As the investigator delved deeper into your life, they began to notice something unsettling. Warnings, hidden in plain sight, urging them to back off. At first they chalked it up to coincidence. A misplaced message, a cryptic line in an old book, maybe even a casual comment from a random person. But as these hints appeared more frequently, it became clear that someone or something was trying to send a message. Don't pry too deeply. It started with the books. When the investigator went through your personal library, seemingly innocent texts began to reveal strange patterns. Passages highlighted with peculiar precision, lines underlined that seemed to offer a warning or a cautionary tale, all mysteriously pointing to the dangers of uncovering too much about you. One book, a dusty collection of obscure philosophy, had pages turned to verses that spoke of hidden truths and the peril of seeking them out. It wasn't the content itself, but the placement of these marked sections that felt deliberate, like someone had been trying to guide them away from a deeper understanding. Then there were the encrypted notes. These weren't just mundane messages. These were carefully constructed puzzles, appearing where they least expected them. A receipt, a random email subject line, a forgotten document on your computer. They were designed to be nearly impossible to decode, but once the investigator took a closer look, the message became clear. Stop looking. Each puzzle, once solved, revealed another piece of a bigger warning, as if someone, maybe even you, was trying to protect them from seeing what lay beneath the surface. And there were the strangers. In the most unexpected of places, people would cross paths with the investigator and casually offer their own warnings, often in the form of bizarre comments or veiled suggestions. A cab driver, a cafe worker, even a passerby on the street, they all spoke in riddles or made strange references that seemed to urge caution. At first, it felt like harmless oddities, but soon it felt like a pattern emerging, one that didn't want to be ignored. By the end of it, the investigator was left with a creeping sense of unease. No matter how they tried to rationalize it, the warnings were too consistent, too intentional. Someone or something was actively guiding them away from the truth. And the more they tried to understand, the more they felt like they were being warned not to uncover something that should remain hidden. Number 12. Temporal anomalies. The investigator began noticing something they couldn't easily explain. As they dug deeper into your past, they stumbled upon images, documents, and records that shouldn't have existed, your face, your name, or your likeness appearing in time periods you couldn't possibly be connected to. It began with an old photograph, an archival image from the early 1900s. At first it seemed like a coincidence, a fleeting resemblance. But then it happened again. There you were in another photo from the 1950s, almost identical to the way you look today. Same posture, same expression, only decades apart. The investigator checked the details. The dates matched. The image wasn't doctored. It was as if you were there in a time you couldn't possibly have been. They thought it might be a fluke, until they found more. Old newspaper clippings with your name listed as a minor figure in an event from the 1970s. A military report from the 1940s mentioned someone fitting your description, with a job title that seemed oddly modern for its time. Even in obscure medical journals from the 1800s, there was an entry that referenced your likeness in relation to a mysterious case of an unidentified illness. What disturbed the investigator most wasn't just the fact that your image seemed to transcend time. It was how consistent these appearances were. There was no mistaking it. Your features, your aura, everything about you was reflected in moments that, by all accounts, should have been impossible. It was as if time itself had bent around your existence, allowing you to slip through eras unnoticed. Records that shouldn't have connected, moments that shouldn't have aligned, but they did. The deeper they went, the more they realized. This wasn't just coincidence. Your presence was embedded in time in ways they couldn't begin to understand, like a shadow that followed you across centuries. By the end, the investigator was left to wonder, were you simply a part of history, or was time itself designed around your existence, forever looping you into the past in ways no one else could experience? The answer, they realized, was one they weren't ready to face. Number 13. Unfathomable calm. The investigator had expected to uncover something tangible. Hidden documents, damning secrets, a hidden side of you that could explain the enigma of your life. But what they found instead was far more elusive, something no amount of digging could fully reveal, a feeling. It wasn't just one person or even a select few. It was everyone, friend or foe, casual acquaintance or close confidant who interacted with you. They all left with the same comment, often unprompted. There's something about them I can't explain. It wasn't a compliment, nor an accusation. It wasn't even a curiosity. It was an unspoken truth, a sensation that lingered long after the conversation ended, a quiet certainty that something about you was fundamentally different from the rest of the world. For some, this feeling was a gentle, unsettling calm. They would describe you as a person who seemed almost too at peace with the world, like you were immune to stress or turmoil, no matter what chaos was unfolding around you. This calm wasn't just a demeanor, it radiated from you, making everyone else feel grounded, even when they were deeply unsettled by everything happening around them. For others, it was an unsettling calm, a stillness so profound that it made them uneasy. They couldn't quite place it, but there was something in your presence that felt too steady, as if you were beyond their reach. In conversations you rarely raised your voice, yet people felt compelled to listen. You didn't need to exert power because your calm exuded a subtle dominance, leaving everyone around you wondering how they could even begin to understand your motivations. And then there were those who found your calm disorienting. The more they interacted with you, the more they felt like their own reality had been slightly warped. The world around them seemed a little more chaotic. Their own thoughts felt a little more tangled. There was something in your presence that challenged the order of their lives, but in a way that felt almost too gentle. In the end, the investigator couldn't pinpoint what made you so different, why your presence evoked this same strange reaction from every person who crossed your path. It wasn't a trait they could track or identify, and no matter how much they tried, they couldn't fit it into any logical framework. All they knew was that you had an effect on people, a calm, unfathomable presence that no one could truly explain. In the end, the investigator found that the truth about you wasn't something that could be neatly packaged or easily explained. It wasn't hidden in files or documents, nor could it be discovered through the traditional methods of research. What they uncovered instead was an aura, a subtle force that defied the conventional understanding of reality itself. The breadcrumbs that had been left behind, whether in cryptic warnings, strange temporal anomalies, or the inexplicable calm you radiated, weren't mere coincidences. They were markers of something much larger, something that tugged at the very fabric of existence. You weren't simply a person who lived among others. You were a force that shaped the world around you in ways that couldn't be measured, recorded, or even fully understood. Time bent to your existence. Influence rippled outward from your every move, and patterns emerged in the chaos as if the universe itself recognized the presence of something extraordinary in you. People, places, and events seemed to align in your orbit as if driven by an unseen hand, drawing a map of destiny with every step you took. And yet, despite all these revelations, the investigator was left with a singular, profound question. What would happen if someone truly understood you? Because the more they uncovered, the clearer it became that your power wasn't in what could be seen, it was in what couldn't be grasped. Your true essence was a mystery that both terrified and fascinated, an enigma that, no matter how hard one tried to decipher, would always remain a step beyond comprehension. As the investigator backed away, they realized something crucial. The more they tried to uncover, the more they felt drawn to you, as if the very act of understanding you was part of the mystery itself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest truth of all. Some things, some people, are meant to be felt, not fully understood, forever leaving a mark on the world in ways no one could ever truly explain. If this journey into the extraordinary left you as captivated and intrigued as we are, then there's so much more waiting for you. The mysteries, the unexplainable moments, and the stories that bend reality itself. This is only the beginning. To uncover even more hidden truths, to dive deeper into the unknown, and to explore the world in ways you've never imagined, make sure to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying in the loop. You're joining a community of curious minds, eager to explore the very edges of what's possible. So don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and let's continue this extraordinary journey together. Who knows what we'll uncover next? Stay curious, stay brave, and remember, the truth is out there. God bless you. God bless.